ようこそどうぞはじめまして
Hello everyone, welcome to the GLORIO Chat, the best anime podcast on the internet. Or at least for now, while anime still exists. Unfortunately, that is kind of in question at the moment. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Today there is still plenty of anime to talk about right now. This is our first normal episode of the spring 2020 season.
And maybe the only normal episode.
So we're going to talk about the latest episodes, all the shows that we kept after our first wave of first looks. And we've kept most of them, actually, so there's quite a bit to go over.
This would have been a busy season, if not for the realities of the current circumstances, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
So, we'll touch on that in a second, but just to introduce everybody, I'm Jel, and I'm joined by Iroh.
I'm still here, not dead yet.
Still here. Joined by G.
What's good, y'all?
And returning to the podcast, we have Zig.
Hello.
Welcome back, Zig. Good
Hi,
to have you.
It's good to be here.
For a while since we had our GLORIO UK correspondent.
One of them, at least.
Yeah. Well, we had Chris and Collins a while back, but even that's been a while now.
Dude, that was like a year ago or something. That was.
I know, time's flying by here, but
that was a long time.
Yeah, we got to get that rotation broadened out a little bit for sure. But anyway, like I said, we're gonna touch base with the shows we've been watching in the season while they're still here, but also kind of the elephant in the room for everything, anime or otherwise, is the impact of the COVID-19 coronavirus situation, which has led to a lot of anime getting canceled or postponed. I had been keeping my own list until the list got too big, and now I think what I'll do is just link Crunchyroll's keeping a running tally of all the shows and movies and everything, including ones that they're not licensed, which is more than Funimation is doing. But I'll link that in the show notes for the most up to date version. Surprisingly, not too many of the shows we're watching have been officially postponed yet.
Give it
for
time.
now.
But yeah, it kind of only feels like a matter of time.
Yeah.
I think it's probably, I'm not an expert, but I feel like it's pretty rare where a series is done before the season starts. So
right. Well, as we discussed in our riveting post podcast conversation last time that was not recorded, I think that the only thing I will say is it is happening a little quicker than I expected. I had initially assumed we would be getting to, say, episodes 5 or 6 before we started getting official cancellations and delays, but
I wonder
aren't even going to make it past episode 3 or 4 at this point.
I wonder how much of that is because, as you say, G, I think that most companies would at least be a few episodes ahead of the curve. I wonder how much of it is simply cancellation because of the circumstances rather than literally running out of episodes, if that makes sense. I wonder if they just feel that it's not appropriate for the show to continue under the current situation.
Yeah, I think some of them, like the ones that didn't even start, I have a feeling it wasn't that they didn't have episodes to air, but maybe they just made the decision rather than play, a couple of episodes.
Right.
Let's just hold it and we can play it all in one shot.
I mean, shit,
because you're kind of taking a risk of
yeah.
If you do play a couple episodes, you're kind of like cutting your series in half, right?
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, there are definitely some shows airing this season that maybe would have been better off airing in one uninterrupted block instead of getting cut off at the knees here and then, having us wait until, say, fall of 2020 before seeing the rest.
Yeah, so, like Zig said, maybe that's more of a creative decision or something rather than they just literally don't have the episodes, but
there's also some talk that even the summer and autumn seasons will be affected by this.
I think they
I
definitely
think
will.
no doubt of that.
Yeah, like I think at least summer for sure is going to be affected.
Because, I mean, they would have probably, like, the production would have been starting on summer by now, right? So, like, that's going to be impacted, I think, even worse.
Yeah, I mean...
But, because the things we're seeing now were probably done, you know, a month ago or something like that, or, you know, 2 months ago or something like that.
I mean, I think for better or worse, we're going to see this kind of have a knock-on effect for a while, right? Because, you know, anime, video games, all this stuff, right? Like, most of it starts fairly, you know, early in comparison to when it is officially revealed, right? Like,
right.
You know, even like the distant projects, like obviously, you know, for me personally, because Trigger is always on the brain, right? Like, you know, to use as an example, something like the Gridman follow-up, SSSS Dynazenon or whatever, like, and that's probably like starting now, right? And like, so even if that's not a summer or fall show, I could see even something that far off in the future getting delayed and getting affected by something like this.
Yeah. I mean, gee, you would know better than any of us if they can actually make the adjustments. Are these kinds of things, like, could you make anime working from home?
I think, so, obviously I support people being able to work from home. I think that is a thing that, you know, companies should allow their employees to do. I think for something like anime production, a collaborative, creative product, I think it could definitely be done, but I think it will intrinsically not be as efficient in some key ways. Like,
right.
For better or worse, especially with something like anime, it helps to have everybody kind of centralized in the same location. Like, it is much, like, just speaking from an artist's perspective, it is much easier to get feedback in person with somebody directly looking at your work and you having, like, a, you know, direct face-to-face conversation where, you know, they can point things out than it is, you know, through email correspondence or, you know, even a Skype sharing or what have you. I think that additionally, I mean, I think a lot of this is going to depend on if Japan can, like, adapt, because a lot of the things they do, not to, like, you know, paint the whole nation with a broad brush, but they are fairly traditional in a lot of the ways they approach things, right? Like, their VA sessions are still done live with all the cast members in the same booth, right? Like,
right. Yep.
Like, that's very different from Western VA production, where voice actors are often only reading their portion of the script, you know, and maybe having the other character being read by, like, a voice director or something.
Right.
And so it's things like that I definitely wonder. I'm curious. I guess that's all I can say. Is I'm curious how this is going to play out.
That's a challenge for a lot of businesses right now, anime or otherwise. It's like, can they adapt?
Right.
You know, if you don't have the infrastructure in place to do that, like how, you know, like little things like where are you saving your files? Like if you're not on the company intranet,
if nothing else,
stuff like that has to get worked out. And if you're not prepared to do that, then, you know, it doesn't matter if it can be done. Just can you do it if you don't have the setup for it?
If nothing else, this is a nation that still heavily uses fax machines. So
yes. So I don't know.
I mean, the other thing I would add to that is that anime production is already so decentralized. You've got so much work being done by other studios, background work, in-between work, and stuff like that, that the task of coordinating all of that just becomes even more difficult when you don't have a central location to put everything together in. So I think that there will definitely be trouble on that front. And of course, different studios in different places and different countries may have different restrictions as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, again, a lot of this is pure speculation, and, you know, some of it I've been reading comes from is more informed speculation, but a lot of it is still speculation at the end of the day. But I think we are definitely going to see how this plays out. It's going to vary from studio to studio. Some studios are going to be hit really hard by this. Other studios maybe have more internalized productions and don't rely on outsourcing as much, and maybe they can weather this out better. And then some studios are just going to throw enough money at the problem until it goes away. And I think it's I think we're going to see some highs and lows in terms of response to the circumstances here.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say regardless, we're going to see a huge impact over the next couple weeks and into next season.
Definitely.
And it's just going to vary how much, but I think everything's going to be affected at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really see things returning to normal before the end of this year, especially given the circumstances at the moment.
Well, I'm looking forward to us crowning Dorohedoro, It Invaded, and Eizouken as our top 3 anime of 2020 because they're the only anime in 2020 that reached the finish line.
Be careful what you wish for.
I might be ready to crown Dorohedoro regardless, but we'll see. All right, so that aside, like I said, there are a couple of shows that are going on hiatus that we have been watching now, immediately. So there are no more episodes other than what's out right now. So I thought we'd touch on those first and just kind of give our thoughts on where we left off on those. So first one I have on the list here is Digimon Adventure, the new reboot, which hit episode 3. And I believe 3 is the last episode that's going to air for the time being. Zig, I know you've been writing about it, and you have not had a chance to talk about it on the podcast, so I don't know if you want to go first and maybe share your thoughts on where that's headed.
Sure, I mean, I've been writing about it on the blog, and if you want in-depth thoughts, you can go and read it there. It's completely fine so far, you know. I'm not entirely sure that I would describe it as anything better than that, but it seems like a competently put together kids show with some nice retro 90s designs. There's been very little concrete plot, there's been very little character development, it's mostly been all action all the time, and we've only been introduced to a very small part of the ensemble so far. So it's kind of tough, especially considering that it's looking like this will be a year-long show, as kids shows are, you know. But I can't say it especially inspires strong feelings in me one way or another, and that's kind of a damning verdict if you think about it.
Like, now, you're saying it's both... It's not good enough to be genuinely good, but it's not bad enough to be a spectacle? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely, you know. I mean, like, it looks nice. They've got some good animation talent working on it, you know. It seems to do the nuts and bolts of a kids show thing absolutely fine. Like I said, it is definitely very action-heavy. It's much more action-heavy than the old show was, you know. I just don't really understand why it exists. I think this is a sentiment Iroh expressed last time as well, and you know, I'm kind of with him in that this seems like a perfectly fine kids show, but I don't get why you would choose to reboot the original Digimon Adventure, unless of course you are pandering directly to the base.
And I assume that's exactly what they want to do, right?
But the thing is, like, it's still a kids show. You know, I mean, it's not like this is suddenly dark and edgy and everybody's swearing and there's blood everywhere or stuff like that, you know. This is still a very simplistic, quite straightforward kids show, you know. So I don't really understand why you would bring back the adventure cast, the adventure designs, but still produce something that is primarily targeted towards people who weren't even alive when that show came out.
I do wonder about stuff like that, but
I think one of the other things we touched on is that they're just trying to do both, where they want to get the kids and they want to do the nostalgia appeal, and maybe that's not a good plan.
Yes, and I mean, one of my major issues with the show so far is that the first arc has been a redo of the R War Game movie, which was like the last arc in the original Digimon Adventure, and it seems very odd that they would leap immediately to what was the climax of the original and introduce a bunch of stuff like Omegamon, the ultimate endgame Digimon, who already showed up in that movie. Like,
that's why I responded the way I did in the last podcast. I was like, really? You're going to lead off with fucking Omnimon in like your second episode of your year-long TV show? Like, what is your play? Like, where do you go from there?
Yeah, let me clarify that Omegamon and Omnimon are in fact the same thing. It's a English-Japanese language thing.
Well.
But
yeah.
but yes, I mean that's for the viewers, for the listeners' benefit, obviously, But I think that it is very weird, The pacing has been very weird. It's very action-loaded, and it's been very much focused on Tai, which worries me because I did enjoy the whole cast ensemble in the original. And I should clarify for people who don't know, I did not watch Digimon Adventure as a child. I watched it as a full-on adult. There is an account of me watching it on the website, but I was well into my 20s before I saw Digimon Adventure, so I don't really have powerful nostalgia for it in the way that a lot of people do. I just think that it's interesting comparing this to the original, and so far it's not a disgrace to the name. It looks nice, I keep saying that, but I don't really see anything that's super compelling thus far.
Right, like it's almost like you could just go watch the original series and that still holds up. Why do you need this to exist?
Absolutely, I mean this is a bit more slickly animated. It certainly updates the pertinent things about the internet, about cell phones and all that kind of thing. But
so it's like the Evangelion movies.
I mean, it's more than just
I'm
the
not
Evangelion movie.
Or are those a disgrace to the series?
I'm not sure who you're insulting with that comparison, but
No, I was gonna say is I think that I don't think we need to be naive here, right? Like we know why these things are being remade, even when they don't need it. It's because they make money, right? Like if you're the Mr. Moneybags and in charge of Digimon, and you look at how the Digimon property has functioned and performed over the last few decades, right? You're gonna go for the reliable bets, and what is the reliable bet? It's the original Digimon Adventure, it's the movies, right? It's the imagery from the movies, it's all that stuff, right? That is why they keep remaking these things even when they don't need them.
Right, and you're absolutely correct, but also the strategy here is very odd and disorganized, because at the same time as this TV show is being produced, Toei are pushing the Last Evolution movie, which is a sequel to the original Digimon Adventure, and generally it does feel as if they've been milking the property pretty hard for the last couple of years, and obviously that's worrying. I think that Digimon did not become a 25-year-old franchise without having a few new ideas along the way. And, I'm kind of ideologically opposed to just rebooting all your original ideas again and again. So
of course,
I'm not necessarily predisposed to dislike the show, but it certainly seems mostly flash and no substance so far, and that's concerning to me because the original Digimon Adventure does have some excellent characterization, it does do some very good world building, and I'm not seeing much evidence of that so far.
Yeah. Alright, well, we'll have to wait to see. Did you have something, Iro?
That's just what he said.
Yes. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes, because that has now officially gone on hiatus after episode 3.
Well, Zig, I look forward to your final thoughts on this show sometime in 2022 at this rate.
Yeah. So, no date released on that, so we'll keep an eye on when that comes back. Moving along, another show that has gone on hold is APPARE-RANMAN.
Maybe the worst possible thing that could happen to a show like this.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll admit to you guys, I could not find the motivation to watch episode 2 and 3.
Understandable.
You didn't miss
after
much.
the first one, so you'll have to fill me in on where we left off. You don't even have to tell me. I'm just assuming they didn't make it to the race.
They
They
did not.
did not get to the race.
We're
So if
spending
they
a bunch
didn't
of
get to the
time
race, what have they been doing?
It's setting up each of the contestants.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Except it's been taking a long time.
and the contestants are not particularly personable or interesting. The biggest problem with APPARE-RANMAN is it is a false savior, right? This is what I told Iro. APPARE-RANMAN wears the vestments, it wears and speaks speaks the words of many a prior GLORIO savior, right? It dresses like a double-decker. It speaks like a Copcraft, but it does not
Are
have...
we gonna put Copcraft on that list?
You know, like, trashy but weirdly good.
Double
like,
Decker probably just better than more like.
Okay,
Cop-
fine. More double decker. Yes, you know this kind of GLORIO show, and
Right.
but it doesn't actually have the spirit of those shows. It's so like it's just so normal.
Is the whole thing with like the main guy having that wild character design but being boring, lifeless genius guy just applied to all the other characters?
Kinda,
like,
yeah.
That kind of,
like so far,
like they have these colorful, amazing character designs, but they're just like normal, boring characters.
Yeah, I think that's that's a good way of putting it. But this all kind of actually gets really frustrating with the third episode, actually, because the third episode actually does have a race. It's like a little race. It's you know, to kind of just like put pump a little stakes into the show, you know. And here's the problem: for the 5 minutes of that race lasts in episode 3, it becomes the APPARE-RANMAN we want that show to be. It's
right when we're cutting off.
yeah. It's goofy. It's like fun. The personality starts to return to the show. Even APPARE himself, right? Like Mr. Boring, disaffected anime genius, during the race has a sudden 180 change in his personality and becomes the like the audacious, wacky racer, mad scientist that we all wanted him to be. And then as soon as the race is over, he returns right back to like disaffected anime genius. And it's like it's like during that race, the people creating this show briefly
like you obviously know what this show needs, but
right.
You can't just try to keep it on all the time, I guess.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's because that segment implies, yeah, the people who work on this show know what this show is supposed to be, and then they just actively choose not to be that show 90% of the time.
Do you think that's a choice, or do you think they simply feel that they don't necessarily want to go at 100% all the time, and that's just a natural byproduct of slowing the pace down occasionally?
If that's
the case, then I don't think it's the right choice. For
I think they made a bad choice then, right? Obviously I think all fiction inherently has, you know, it's a roller coaster, right? Like you have your moments of rest and you have your moments of excitement. But I think that for a show like, I mean, hell, I keep bringing it up when this show comes up, but even Red Line is like that, right? It has its exciting moments and it has its downtime. I think the difference is like APPARE has not yet convinced us that it actually has what it takes to make the exciting parts properly exciting. Like the race we see in episode 3 is a brief glimpse of that, but unfortunately it's just not enough of a promise that this show has what it takes to keep that energy up when it really matters.
Yeah.
And now that it's getting delayed, like, it's kind of like the worst possible thing that could happen to a show like this, right?
How can we muster up the enthusiasm to go back to episode 4 of APPARE-RANMAN 6 months from now or whatever?
Right. Like, if this show was still airing, I think we'd keep up with it because, like, you know, we want to see that race, right? And, like, but are you telling us, oh, we're going to tune into episode 4 of APPARE-RANMAN in September or something? Like, we might not even remember, like, what the fuck is going on anymore by then.
Yeah, it's like any momentum that they might have, even a small amount of momentum is going to be way gone by the time it comes back, right?
And I don't think we really have much else to say about this show other than, you know, how disappointing it's been. But I do want to just make a brief shout out to its really baller OP that is also the most fucking disingenuous opening segment I've seen since maybe the Mappa Dororo anime, of like greatest disparity between quality of the OP and quality of the show itself, because APPARE-RANMAN's OP has everything we're talking about. Like,
yes,
that OP is cool as shit, but none of that is in the anime itself.
Well, a lot of good OP and EDs this season.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's another one that's stopped at episode 3. and with no date of return on that. So again, we'll have to see what happens when it comes back. But like I said, I just, after the first episode, it was like so deflating. I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna let the other guys watch it, and they can tell me if I need to get back on or not.
You made the smart choice, Jill.
So, all right. So one more show that got delayed we're going to talk about. Did anybody else watch episode 2 of Millionaire Detective?
I did.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
I think we did.
Okay, so
right?
G, you're the only one who didn't watch episode 2, right?
I did not.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
So, well, first of all, this was one of the later airing shows, which means it only got to episode 2 and now is on break. They did announce, for now at least, it's hard to take anything that far out seriously these days, but they did announce that they're planning on resuming July 16th, so they're just going to skip back to the next season. But who knows what's going to happen at this point. That is the plan for now, though. But yeah, so Millionaire Detective, Balance Unlimited. I think I actually liked episode 2. I don't know what you guys were thinking.
I thought episode 2 was solidly entertaining, but it kind of lacked the zip of episode 1 for me. I could have gone with them going a bit more over the top. And I realise that's kind of a crazy thing to say about an episode which features a secret underground lab and a rocket launcher helicopter. But
right.
I did feel that it kind of... The joke didn't snap quite as hard in episode 2. I think I wanted more ostentatious displays of wealth just to, push the joke a little further, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how long it could keep the same joke going, and have it still be funny.
Yeah. I have to wonder, because we were kind of debating where they're going to go with that. Are there any other angles to approach this other than just what ridiculous way can he buy his way out of
right
for what it's
this time?
I think you could actually go pretty far with that one joke if you're just imaginative about it.
Right. And this one was just get be Batman basically, and your sister is Alfred. But the which that was kind of an interesting twist, but I there was one moment that stood out to me where okay, we're gonna see where this show is going with this, when they were doing the interrogation of the two small time criminal guys they bring in, and Millionaire Detective guy is trying to bribe the one guy, and then you have the old detective guy who's trying to appeal to his better nature, and I'm like, okay, so this is where we're gonna see where the show is going. If the Millionaire Detective guy breaks him, then they're just going to go all in on the money fixes everything thing. If the old guy breaks him, then they're going to say, oh, well, maybe money can't buy everything. That's where we're going with this. And
right, but they bottled it because they both succeeded.
They were both successful, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what that means
and
then.
That scene kind of encapsulates my problems with the episode, which is if you're going to have the old guy break him, it needs to be even more over the top. If you're going to have rich guy bribe him, it needs to be more over the top. But both of those needed to be bigger, crazier displays of silliness.
Right. It did it seemed like an opportunity to do something, anything with the and they just kind of don't go anywhere with it. But I don't know. I think, because I think I kind of share this concern with G, where I don't like that type of character, the Millionaire Detective guy's type of character, and he is supposed to be kind of a dick, but how bad are they going to lean into it? I guess
he needs a bit more Seto Kaiba DNA in him.
Yeah, now that you say that, right? I think that's what I need. I think that's what I needed from this show. Again, I only watched episode 1, but he's an asshole rich guy, but he's not so over the top that he becomes a caricature.
He needs to show up in a Blue Eyes White Dragon jet for me to like absolutely be in.
Well, at the end, he does have a jet with his name on it.
Right, but it's the difference between like that's kind of a good illustration. It's the difference between the theory of a joke and the execution of a joke. Right, if he had shown up in a gold-plated helicopter, then something like
Right.
that. I think. For me, at least, I need it to go further. I need it to be so over the top that it becomes, just an out-and-out goof.
Right. I agree. That said, it was still pretty fun.
Oh, it's definitely not bad.
I would definitely be willing to watch more if there were more episodes.
The OP is good. I'll give that show that much.
The ending is excellent.
Yeah, the ending too. The ending is very good. Yep. So again, unfortunately, that only made it to 2 episodes. So there's not really too much more to say about it. It still has some promise to it, and hopefully we'll still care by the time July comes around, if that's when it comes back. But yeah, we'll have to see. All right. One more thing I wanted to catch up on. We kind of shortchanged Kakushigoto last week, as I forgot to put it on the list, and Artemis declared it her favorite show of the season.
She called us out on our snub.
Yeah, so after that snub, I know G, you watched all. There's 4 episodes out now. You watched all of it, right?
I watched all 4.
And I watched the first episode. I didn't have time to watch more. What did you think, G?
I really like it. I'm actually surprised by how much I like it, because I am not the biggest, I'm not a Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei hater, but it is not my favorite, surrealist comedy in the world. But Kakushigoto is, there's it is kind of it's kind of Yotsuba by way of that style and aesthetic and sensibility. It's actually very sincere. It is a comedy at the end of the day. It is very comical. But there's because it's kind of anchored by a sincerity to its premise. It works. It actually does come together in a fairly compelling way. The comedy is well done. I do think that like Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, the wordplay sometimes gets a little.
Yeah, they beat that drum a little too hard.
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. It's usually, I think, compared to Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, I think that Kakushigoto is a lot better about it. But there is a joke in episode 4 that is basically incomprehensible to a non-native speaker, and the only way you can tell it's a joke at all is because the characters are responding to it in the way anime characters do when something funny is happening. But
I will say that I don't think the understanding of the jokes is helped by some poor subtitling work on Funimation's part.
Yes, they're not even attempting to do anything with it. They're just literally putting in parentheses the word.
And also just the presentation of the subtitles, where sometimes you've got 5 or 6 lines of text all stacked at the bottom of the screen, can be an issue.
Right.
A couple shows maybe suffering from that this season, but but yeah, I think that at its core though, I do think that it is a fun show. I wouldn't call it my front runner, but it's charming, it's funny, it has a lot of heart. I've definitely kind of come around on it now. I think that there are some the thing I would say about its style of comedy is you don't even have to go into it thinking, oh, is it like a Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei? Its comedy is a lot more accessible. It's a lot more approachable. There's some. Hey, look, we know the dangers of trying to describe a joke in a podcast, but there are some really good bits, the main character, right, the dad, he's a single dad, right, and there's this running bit that he keeps accidentally wooing all of these young women in his life. He's not doing it on purpose, but he just says things.
Oh, we've never seen that in anime, right?
And then they just interpret it as oh my god, he's hitting on me, wow, what a cool hot single dad. And that's a premise that's been done before, but there's a scene, I think in episode 2 or 3, that basically just runs with that to its logical conclusion, and I think it works very well. So
Yeah. And Zig, you said you've been watching it too, right?
Yes, although I'm one episode behind. I have not seen episode 4 yet. I'm largely with G. I think it's a comedy that's not necessarily a laugh out loud comedy, but there's definitely a lot of chuckles and oh, that was good, that was funny, I liked that. It's quite low key. It's very close to Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei in the sense that it's not quite a black comedy, but it's definitely a darker shade. There's definitely quite a few jokes being cracked about, the disreputability of the mangaka life and the hard work that it involves and stuff like that. I think visually it's fantastic. It's a good meld of that artist's style with some real flamboyance in the animation department. So, for some reason, I can't necessarily love it, but I do enjoy it and plan to watch more. There's just something missing that would push it right over the edge for me.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jill.
No, I was just going to say, because I did watch the first episode, and I think I will probably try to catch up. The humor, it feels like, and again, with this author, maybe that's just the thing. It feels like thinks it's maybe smarter than it actually is, with like the wordplay and stuff like that. I found that a little annoying, but it was fine. I think I mean, it's kind of more just a dad anime, right? Like than a laugh out loud type of comedy.
It's a very gentle kind of comedy,
right? Which is, usually that's what you get with a dad anime, right? But and I do wonder if there is some sort of kind of like a hint of melancholy to it a little bit.
They definitely.
But because I mean, the obvious thing being, I guess his wife died or something, right? And are they basically implying that he's dead by the time she's 18?
I feel like the joke is going to be that's what you think all along, and then at the end they reveal it's not the case.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but who knows? That's whether he is or not, that's, the whole black humor thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're making a joke off of it.
The framing device certainly feels surprisingly melancholy.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I think that's the thing that kind of works for me, honestly, is like, it is not a black comedy. It is a little, the humor is a little darker, but I think, again, I guess the word I keep parroting is, like, there's a sincerity to it. Like, Again, yes. Even if the dad not actually being dead is probably the long con joke they are going for here, like they're approaching it fairly straightforward. Like the circumstances in general. I mean, like it's there is humor there, but it is not being played like as an explicit laugh out loud joke.
Right. Yeah, so I there's a lot to like, and I'll be curious once I catch up, because right now I'm still only going off the one episode. I do really very much, just to echo Zig's thoughts, like the art style, and the presentation's really nice to go on top of it as well. So it's pretty good.
For what it's worth, I would say that first episode is highly representative of what you're going to get. It's mostly just more of that, and I don't say that in a condemning way, but it is a very good idea of what the future episodes are like.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I'll probably like the rest of it too, so I'll have to catch up on that for next time.
Speaking of anime that are very indicative of their tone within the first episode.
Oh man, so yes, let's move along then to Kaguya-sama Love is War Season 2. I don't know why, you can stop me if I go off the rails here, but I feel like they've really just been killing it with Season 2, and I don't know why, because like they're not really doing anything drastically different or anything. I guess in episode 3 they play a little into your nostalgia for Season 1 a little bit, but
yes, I did like I did like that sort of pseudo recap episode, except with the running joke of just like Ishigami being like, I
wasn't here for that.
I wasn't here for that. I don't remember this.
He doesn't show up till like at least halfway through season 1 or something
but
like
it is played to like the very good like feeling of like when you were hanging out with some other friends who knew each other before you started hanging out with them, and they start talking about something. And you're like, motherfuckers, I wasn't even there. Like, but yeah, I do agree with you, Jill. I feel like Kaguya-sama, like, it's hard to tell if like it feels so good because it's been a while, or if it's just genuinely they've been really hitting it out of the park. But it really does feel like they are going hard right out the gate, like with their best material.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe too, it's just that since this is season 2, we've had longer amount of time to endear ourselves to these characters, or
right. But I mean, I think
something like that. But
I think there was always the risk of like, okay, I think there's a twofold risk with a season 2 of a comedy, right? Like, the first is the situation where the jokes get stale, right? Like, they run out of material, right? This is what we saw happen to Osomatsu season 2, is just,
right.
Oh, you haven't
Right.
You haven't brought anything new to the table. But then there's the other risk of a romantic comedy of, well, now that the romance has been established, time to shoo out the comedy and bring in the drama. And I'm glad that Kaguya-sama has not done that either, right? Like, it feels like the show is still true to itself. It's just finding new ways to express it. Yeah,
and they do dabble with a little more into the romance part in episode 3, but it's still, they never go too far, right?
And also, like, it's still purely a joke, right? Like, just
right.
Like how unintentionally
it's still in the
smooth,
context of a big joke.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what's working, right? Is like, yes, the plot, the quote-unquote plot, right, has evolved a little bit, right? Time has moved forward. But at the end of the day, like, the jokes are still hitting because, like,
right.
Even if the characters are the same, even if, like, the scenario is relatively the same, I think that they are still doing, like, finding just enough new ways to express that old joke that it continues to work really well.
Yeah. I kind of like, one of the things I noticed, how there's actually some continuity to the episodes. Like, so, like, episode 1 and 2, there's this whole, like, background thing going on of, like, Kaguya trying to prepare for the president's birthday. And right. That's kind of, like, sprinkled into... Because each episode is, like, 2 or 3 different segments, right?
Yeah.
Of, like, usually how anime comedies work, where, you know, you have one kind of, you know, set piece, and then move on to the next one. But they all kind of had that lingering in the background, and then, you know, they finally have the birthday thing. And then by episode 3... He still has the fan that she gave him for the birthday party, but they don't mention it or anything. He just has it. Like, there's continuity to it. And then and like in episode 3, like I said, they kind of dabble into the actual romance part of it a little bit. But I was kind of kicking myself for being so dumb and not realizing the whole Kaguya moon connection thing, because like, the president is all like, oh man, I sure love the moon and all that. And then they eventually tie back in the whole Kaguya legend, because I would say her name is Kaguya, but yes. And then how that ties to their relationship and everything. I'm like, oh, how did I not see that coming from
I will say that
away?
As soon as he started mentioning looking at the moon, I was like, oh, this is going to turn into like a Kaguya, Legend of Kaguya thing, isn't it? But what I did not expect is how fucking... how good that bit was actually going to be. Like...
It was kind of, it was kind of like the reverse of, you remember that episode where she gets sick and like loses all her senses?
Yes.
It was kind of like the reverse of that, where he was turned into such an idiot that he didn't realize how smooth he was being.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And I mean, again, I do appreciate that, like, immediately after that bit, right, like...
when he realizes.
Right, like, the show has enough, like, self-awareness that, like, it's not just, like, it's not like, it's not like he's just like, huh, I don't get it. It's like... A few days removed from the event, he looks back and he's like, oh no, right, like, I said all of these things.
Yeah, and like we said, they kind of play on the nostalgia a bit, because the time actually passed, and like
Yeah.
the student council has to break up.
The only joke, I forget if this was a thing from season 1. The only bit I didn't really quite understand was when Ishigami just casually reveals the hidden chamber in the council office. Like, is that
I don't remember that being anything. But even if that were just like a random non sequitur, that's pretty funny.
It was pretty good, yes. But
I'm just like, and we're not going to explore that any further.
Right.
There's just some random hidden passage in the student council room. And I guess it looks like it's setting up for like an election arc.
Yeah, I mean,
which
again,
could be fun.
haven't read the manga, not familiar with it. I don't know. Have you read the manga?
No, I haven't either. I think
Okay,
only Aqua's read it.
Okay, because I mean, the OP obviously hints at some new characters that we have not yet even met or seen, right? Like,
right. So
I assume the cast is probably getting expanded in some way.
Yeah. So I that shaking it up a little bit, even just a little bit, is I think good direction to go. So
yeah,
I'm
I mean,
looking forward to
like again, I am almost annoyed that episode 1 teased that great bit with Kaguya's her servant Ai. Like, that's a fantastic bit, and then she's gone again. Like, I was like, no, I was like, bring her back. Like, this is some good material.
Well, I'm sure she'll be back again, yeah. But we'll see. All right, so that show's still great, and hopefully they'll be keeping that up, and not canceled for now.
I certainly hope not.
We'll see. All right, moving on to a show that we may be less positive on. Let me just ask you questions to kick off our discussion here on. We're talking about Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise.
Go ahead.
Which show is more furry this season, this or BNA?
I mean, I think it still has to be BNA, but
oh, I don't know. That dude is gonna fuck that cat. I've been calling this since season 1. That's gonna happen. This is happening.
We called that season 1, yeah. We called that 8 years ago. This show, I've realized, is way closer to the lineage of SD Gundam than actual Gundam.
Yeah.
SD Gundams tend to be like goofy fantasy shows where everyone happens to be a Gundam or have Gundam themed powers, but otherwise has nothing to do with the themes of what Gundam is.
Right.
So you're saying on a scale of war is bad to hey cool robot.
But that's the problem, right? Because the last 2 episodes of season 1 go to almost 0080 levels of war is bad in the span of like 20 minutes. But
that's quite a climb.
And then we're straight back to just like fantasy. Here's a dragon. We're fighting the evil god.
Right, like, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, Build Divers Re-Rise could literally exist at both endpoints of the WoW Cool Robot War is Bad Gundam spectrum. Like, it exists in both places at the same time.
And not in a good way. It's
not
not even
not
on.
in a
It
good
feels
way.
like it's not even on the spectrum is the problem.
No, it's...
Well, isn't part of it? It's not WoW Cool Robot because there's no robots.
Kinda, yeah.
Yes, that's also the problem, is that...
There's nothing. There's like no. For being part of the Gundam Build series, it sure has nothing to do with Gundam Build. Like,
Yeah, I don't even remember the last time they built a fucking robot in this show.
off screen between seasons.
Like, man, like, back in my day, when the protagonists wanted to build a cool robot, they'd have a cool montage of them, like, snipping gunpla pieces off of a sprue while Yuki Hayashi does his, like, weird techno rap thing in the background, and it was great.
Uh-huh.
So what you're saying is Build Fighters has always been bad.
No, I'm saying that...
His original Build Fighters, like, is able to exist by being 110% on the WoW Cool Robot spectrum and leaning fully into that.
Right, it's unapologetic
and making no bones about
right.
we're playing with dumb toys.
It is the show that carted out Ramba Ral to say, no, liking cool robots is in fact cool.
It's okay to play with toys.
Yeah.
Did anything notable happen since the last time we talked in these 2 episodes?
They
The dragon? Did they fight the dragon with a Gundam? That's all I need to know.
There's a shot of a Gundam riding that dragon.
All right, well that's something, right?
But also, like, I just have yes, they tricked us with those last 2 episodes of season 1, right? It's like, those were really good episodes, and we were interested, but tonally, we're right back to just, like, fun fantasy adventure times.
Right, it's like the most generic, like, kids show fantasy adventure, right? Like, oh, we gotta go to the 4 temples to blah, 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 and it's just like, really? Like, this is what we're doing, huh?
This is how we're...
This is where Gundam Build sub-series has gone.
Yeah, it's...
So, are you guys really going to watch this whole thing?
Yes.
Of course.
Okay. Well...
We're over 50% through, Jel.
You've condemned yourselves.
Look, ever since I watched the original Gundam Build Fighters, I have condemned myself to watching the entire series. That's just how it is. Like, that's just how it is at this point.
You can't help those who don't want to be helped.
That's true. Yes.
Because you never know, it might get cool again. You never know. Season 1 was so good.
I thought the problem was that it was too cool at the moment, and it needed more War is Bad.
All right. Well, we'll continue to monitor your pain as time goes on here. Let's move along.
Speaking of middling mech shows.
All right. What's going on with Sakura Wars?
They fought the Moscow combat review showed up with their orbital fortress parked above Tokyo.
Sounds great.
The little girl MacGuffin might be a demon.
Of course.
Shrine Maiden had to go back home to remember her roots or something. And I'm running into this issue where we've talked about this off tape, G, but like,
yes,
because this Sakura Shore is not an adaptation of the new game. It takes place after the new game, but the like level of quote unquote character development happening in this show feels as though this ought to be happening in the game, if that makes sense. Obviously, I have not played the game. I don't know what kind of character work goes on in the game.
So they wrote a story as the sequel, but then the actual content of the story is like as if you had not played the game.
So
they're trying to make up for it.
The past 2 episodes have been about like the hot-blooded gung-ho one is feeling upset because she's not as strong as she needs to be, and she ran off, did disobeying orders, etc. And I'm like, shouldn't the plot about teamwork and trusting your friends have been in the game before this?
Right, like, I've played a JRPG before. The segment where the hot-blooded Lancer runs off from the party, that's like an Act 2 thing in the game itself. That's not something that should be happening in the sequel to the game. And, I mean, that's the thing, is like, even if that isn't the case, like, maybe there was no character development to speak of, because these characters are extremely one-note anime archetypes, and so, like...
Yeah, in my limited Sakura Wars experience, that may not be the anime, that may be the game. But.
And it is definitely a weird thing, right? Because, like... So, the premise so far has been, the player character from the games is not around. He was sent off to some secret mission abroad, right?
Right.
So now it's just the girls...
Call in for a minute for each episode or something.
Yeah, so it's like, it's up to the girls to hold it down, you know? And so, like, there's actually a fairly interesting premise you could work with here of, like, what does the supporting cast do and act like when the player character from the games is absent? The problem is that the anime's answer is they act exactly the same. And it's not very interesting.
Yeah.
But it's still weirdly fun in the like way that like watching something that is all flash and no substance is, because like
you still have these robots and top hats, and the Moscow combat review is just a bunch of fucking stormtroopers in identical clothing.
Except for one.
Except for one, that's a pretty
special
lady.
One.
But it's like,
And,
the dude, like, they all walk in, these 5, like, dudes walk in, these 5 ladies walk in full face covering, like, bad guy gear, and the pretty boy leader's like, oh, you see, they're wearing this because, as was established in the first episode, we were all blown the hell up, and they need to hide their horrible injuries. And then,
Wait,
then one of them takes off
Wow.
the costume, and it's just a normal-ass anime girl who looks fine. Like, it's like...
Right.
They didn't even give her like a token scar on her face or
No,
something?
it's like-
no. It's obvious the dude is fucking lying.
Right.
Right.
But then it's
just
But,
ridiculous.
then they fucking orbital drop from their floating fortress in episode 2 with their identical, Russian steampunk mechs with laser lances, and they fuck up
Like the big robot T-Rex demon.
cyborg T-Rex. It's like straight up some fucking Doom 2016 shit. It's like a fucking dinosaur with cybernetic enhancements and like a laser cannon for an arm, and like
Okay.
there are things that are like, you look at this and you're like, yeah, this is all right.
Well, game adaptations are bad. Who knew, right? No, I continue to feel like Sakura Wars is probably best experienced as a video game than an anime, as is anything that's sort of visual novel adjacent. But and the game does come out next week, I believe, in globally.
I believe it.
So I probably actually play the game. So maybe I will check out the anime after I've played the game, and we'll see if that's any different. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's hard to figure out how best to tackle those kinds of adaptations, and that is an interesting way of going about it. But it sounds like it's still a bit of a mess.
Indeed. Speaking of messes with dinosaurs.
All right, let's move along and talk about Gal and Dino. Some mixed opinions across the GLORIO blog about Gal and Dino. I know my stance is I like the Gal and Dino part, and maybe not so much the live action bits that are in the second half.
See, I'm completely the opposite. I think that the anime bits are fine, but the live action bits are where the meat is. So I think it's think it's interesting that we're completely opposed on that, so to speak.
Well, here's the thing. Through episodes 1 and 3, I was flipped on that, where I thought I liked the anime bits a lot, but the live action was fine. Like it was tolerable.
Yes.
Like and it was kind of funny just in how ridiculous it
Yes.
was. But I was like, if it were my preference, I'd prefer to just have the straight up anime without all that nonsense. Episode 4, I almost didn't finish watching.
So yes, it's a lot. Episode 4 it's a real test of endurance. Let's say.
Wow, you're really selling me on this. As someone who only watched the first 2 episodes, I really feel compelled to watch the next 2 now.
So let me issue my defense first.
Okay, well, just for context, the first half of the episode is normal anime like usual, and then they go to their live action bits. And previously, the live action bits have been this sort of slightly off retelling of some of the things that happened previously. And actually, episode 3 was pretty straightforward because they replaced the middle-aged guy with just the woman he lives with, the gal that he lives with, and it was almost just like redoing the beginning of the episode, and it was pretty normal. That wasn't really the case with 4, where they brought in, I'm assuming he's a known comedian guy.
I looked it up.
Yeah, who was basically a out-of-shape middle-aged man in his underwear and a cowboy hat that was making noises and dancing. Not words, noises.
So slapping his belly and making dumb faces and...
Yeah, so Zig, I would like to hear your defense of this.
Okay.
Because that went on for like 15 minutes.
That's,
Okay.
that's long for a bit.
as a pure act of nihilistic shit posting, it's magnificent. It
Okay,
is.
see,
So, like, to be serious for a moment, I didn't like episode 4. It dragged on way too long. It's that peculiarly Japanese style of comedy where it's not really funny to me, at least, you know. I do have some admiration for just how brazen it is, but I think my main thing with Gal and Dino at the moment is I keep watching, hoping they will get back into the Shota Aoi verse and explain like his Crisis on Infinite Earths thing with him trying to save the old dude and travel through time, and then the landlady can travel through time as well, and that's what I want to see more of. You know, the live action sections for episodes 3 and 4 have been fine to tedious. I did like seeing Dino in a cowboy hat last episode, but
Yes,
what
good.
I want more of is that rich mythology featuring Shota Aoi.
And you know what? I would be fine with that if that's the direction that they stayed on. And I'm assuming they're going to get back to that at some point, but who knows?
It's hard.
This director seems to do whatever
It's
they
hard
want.
to say, and like I wasn't entirely joking. I do admire just the sheer gall it takes to do a 15-minute segment of just a dude in a dinosaur costume and a fat comedian having a bath. There's
It sounds funny when you say it, but when you try to watch it for 15 minutes,
well, that's the thing,
it's
right?
painful.
That's the
I know
difference
people
between,
who
like,
would think this is the greatest thing ever made. Is the problem? Like, I know those people.
I guess it's just like, to me, it's like, yes, like as a 30-second, 2-minute, maybe even 5-minute bit, like that's almost tolerable. But like 15 minutes, like
It's half the episode. Yeah.
yeah, that's.
I respect the commitment to the bit. You know, that's not an attempt to make people watch it. It's not an attempt to make people think it's funny, because I don't necessarily think you should do either. But I admire the sheer bullheaded commitment to it, you know. And I think it is, like, I am entertained because it is weird. You know, it's not funny, it's not clever, but it is weird, and that's something that I will watch. So that's the only way I can defend it, you know.
Yeah. Well, again, that's how I felt with the first 3 episodes, where it's like, okay, it's weird, at least it's kind of interesting, or, you know, whatever. But this was just like, nails on chalkboard, like, watching it for me. And I continue to feel like the director wants to make one type of show, kind of like what they did with Pop Team Epic, and the material is not giving it to them, and so they're just making stuff up.
I think that's fascinating, though. I think it's fascinating because, by all accounts, the manga is just, you know,
The first half of the show.
like, yeah, and like, you know, a perfectly ordinary, silly premise, like reliable execution manga. And I think, for better or worse, they're making it interesting. You know, I'm not going to say elevating the material, but they're definitely throwing everything they can at the wall and seeing what sticks. And again, I can't necessarily say I like that, but I am fascinated by it. I watch because I'm interested to see what they will try next.
Right. I to a certain degree, I agree with that. Like, I'm going to keep watching it, even though I almost barely survived episode 4, because I know they're probably not going to do that again in episode 5. They're probably going to do something completely different. So, you know, there's something to be said for that. That said, me personally, I would prefer that almost these were 2 different entities. Just give me my Gal and Dino nice slice of life anime in one hand, and then if we want to do something weird somewhere else, let's do that somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I just don't feel like they mix.
And I think
well.
that's perfectly valid. You know, the only thing I would say is that, you know, when you've been watching anime as long as we all have, and, you know, it's been well over 10 years for most of us, there's something to be said for the shock of the new. And at the very least, I'm interested to see what happens. And that is the appeal for me. You know, it won't be for everybody, but that's the appeal for me, at least.
And I mean, it is. I mean, I do feel like they were pulling some of these tricks with Pop Team Epic too. So like, there's almost like it is new, like it is unpredictable because that being like Pop Team Epic still means like you could do whatever you want, but also it still feels like that a little bit. I don't know. It's weird, man. But I agree from the perspective of just having something fresh in itself has an appeal to it. And like I said, I'll keep watching it. So.
But yes, I would very much like them to get back to, Shota Aoi hopping between universes like Harbinger, just seeing the destruction of Old Man Miharu again and again and powerless to stop it. I think they've got something really going there. Also, I just want to say that I love the fact that they don't need to establish that Shota Aoi can time travel because they established that in Pop Team Epic and it's just a given now. So I appreciate the intercontinuity.
Expanded universe stuff, yes. Ira, do you have anything to add on this? Don't. Okay.
Except perhaps that tone of voice, which tells you everything you need to know.
All right. So, G, we're trying. I'm trying to save you from this timeline where you watch episode 4. Basically, it's what it's coming down to.
I gotta be real. Like, look. I am.
If I can stop G from watching episode 4, the universe will be saved.
Better call Shota Aoi.
Look. The Pop Team Epic Defender has logged on. As somebody who genuinely loved that show's brand of nihilistic shitposting, as Zig put it, y'all really are not selling me on Gal and Dino. Like,
yeah, it's because I don't think it mixes well with that type of story, but. I don't want to retread it all.
Yeah, again, to me, the clash is the interesting part, but it's certainly not the same kind of like consistent, like anti-funny that Pop Team Epic was. This is definitely way more haphazard.
Right. Okay. Well, let's move along to something more predictable, perhaps. Sure. My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, which has continued to be
totally
exceed expectations, I think.
Not by much, but...
You mean
not by much, but
My Next Life as a Villainess, the winner by technical default of Anime of the Season, because it is the only anime that is guaranteed to finish this season.
Yes.
Yes, they have confirmed. I think this one is actually going to finish. So this may be the last anime standing at the end of the season. But
winner of the battle royale by just surviving.
Hit in the bathtub all game long.
It's it's pretty solid. They did finally go there because I think we all
grew up.
We all figured they were going to time skip at some point. So by episode 4, they do the time skip. And, she starts to see the repercussions of everything she was doing over the past 7 years, how she changed the game, and how she perhaps didn't change the game. Mostly it's everyone, both male and female, has now fallen in love with her instead of the main heroine, and possibly including the main heroine.
Possibly?
Okay, including the main heroine, because she's stealing all the romance flags from everybody.
Right.
And I mean, again, it's an interesting twist on this whole plot of she's basically saving everything by being a nice person. I do wonder if they're going to go with, like... there's a couple directions I felt like they could have gone in episode 4, where it's like, is just another villain going to inevitably appear? Or is she going to accidentally become the villain at some point herself? At least through everyone's perspective.
I feel like that. I think that might be too sophisticated of a plot twist for something like this.
Well, I mean, they can't. Something's got to happen, right? Like they can't just keep going with everybody being friends and.
I don't know.
I mean, I guess they could, but that would be.
Now you just move into full on school tropes, right? Now that they're at Magic Academy, it's just the same shit.
They just come up with more dating flags to reverse.
100%.
I don't know. Part of me wants I do this every time, Ira. You have to stop me. Part of me wants to hold out hope that they're going to go in that direction where, like, she accidentally becomes the villain or another villain appears in some capacity. So that it's just not the same thing over and over again. I think because of the way it's been in the first couple of episodes where, you know, every episode was kind of introducing a new character, which had a different backstory to explore, and then episode 4 was the time skip, so everything still feels fresh. So it doesn't feel like they've recycled too much yet.
Right.
But we could be going down that path where, oh, here's another typical event where the guy picked up her handkerchief and she's like, oh, what a nice guy, or whatever. But instead it's the girl this time.
It's going to keep being this.
And that's literally one of the things that happened in episode 4. Yep. So, I mean, they could just keep going down that checklist.
We'll keep blundering through the show with, like, aggressive stupidity and niceness.
Yeah.
And I think that's the joke. The only joke.
Right. Well...
Which, I mean, look, it could be way worse.
Yes, if that were the case, I'd probably still enjoy the show. Because at this point in history, I just like...
Nice people.
Nice people.
I do think it is interesting, actually, like, listening to this. Like, it's making me realize that I think 3 of the, like... I mean, I guess this show's not technically a comedy, but...
It's trying.
No, this show's a comedy.
Is it try? Okay,
it's
well,
definitely
okay,
a comedy.
Fine. Then I think it is interesting that 3 of the major anime comedies this season are kind of basically trading on one primary joke, and then the interesting thing is seeing the variances in how they succeed at executing that joke in different ways, right? Like, you compare this to, say, Kaguya-sama or Kakushigoto, again, like, shows that are largely trading on one fundamental joke, but then the interesting...
I mean, that's usually the way anime comedies go, though, right? It's just a matter of how many ways can they...
spin it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, yes, it's one one joke. How much mileage can they get out of it? And you know, that's just depends on how good your writing is and whatnot.
You know, like,
but...
ideally it'll start to wear thin around the time the show ends, and then we can go, yeah, it was okay.
Right.
I feel like that's the best that we can hope for at this point.
I mean, I will say if I were to compare this to, you know, similar overachiever last season, Bofuri, where that also had kind of one joke, but it was just about people being nice to each other. This show is better than Bofuri, I would say.
Really? Okay.
I think it's better written and has more interesting characters and
I will
fun
say
characters
other
and stuff like that.
Is a good way to expand on the joke of she is just stupid and oblivious by having the, like, internal courtroom every time. Is a decent way to pad that out. Because every time something happens, she, like, we go inside of her brain and here's, like, the smart version of her personality and the, like, happy version of her personality. You know, the
Wait,
whole,
are you...
Like, and
are you describing...
You're
describing my next life as a villainess, right? No,
yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And, like, so every time something happens, we go to this, like, committee table, and they talk it out, and all of them are stupid, and oblivious.
Yes, including the smart ones, supposedly smart ones, are all kind of
for
dumb.
a second there, I thought, wait, are we talking about Kaguya-sama again? Because I think that also has the exact same bit.
That's actually a pretty common thing in the comedies these days. But
the internal courtroom of the mind.
Like Ira said, it's kind of funny in this one because they're all dumb, even the smart ones. But yeah, so that it has a good sense of humor to it, I think. And again, I just like nice stuff these days. So.
In these dark times.
Yes. So so like always, I'm probably gonna get my hopes higher than they should be and have them dashed later. But like I said, even if it does pan out the way you're saying, Iro, I would probably still be fine with it.
Yeah.
Be satisfied with it. I feel like it could go even another level, but we'll see. Oh boy.
Yes.
Where do we even start?
What's next up, Jel?
Where do we start with this train wreck? All right, so let's talk about listeners. And before we get to the newest episodes, we were talking about how I'm the only one that didn't watch Eureka 7 on the podcast, and maybe I should watch it.
No, you shouldn't.
Yes, you should.
No, just just for the sake of like bringing fresh eyeballs to it without the context of its predecessors. So I didn't get to watch all of them. I watched episodes 1 and 2.
Okay. Boy, how episode 4 though.
So the bits before it became a mess then.
I disagree.
What, dude?
Episode 2 is a fucking mess.
Yeah, so
I'm just saying, compared to what came after,
it only got worse after that. But yeah, so I liked episode 1. I thought episode 1 was solid. You know, signed me up for guitar amp robots and all that stuff. And episode 2, you know, as they're running away, whatever, it was fine. And then after he like goes to take a piss in that ancient bathroom and Yorha shows up, that
Glory to bad Kai.
It kind of all went downhill after that. Like I had no idea what was going on, and I didn't really care.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, honestly, in hindsight, like looking at episodes 3 and 4 as well, yes, the moment Yorha shows up in episode 2 is the beginning of the unraveling of listeners as like a cohesive narrative.
So, before we start, can I point out the one biggest problem with the show?
Of course.
By all means.
Okay, so there's multiple background references to Oasis, but Oasis were clearly not as good as Blur, and that's a massive issue. Okay, carry on.
I think that's less of a bigger deal here in the United States, Zig. But
yeah, but I'm only talking about the important people.
I agree.
Yes. Okay.
I agree, Oasis is.
I feel like with every episode, I have to completely reevaluate what I'm expecting out of this show.
Yeah.
And so, like, it kind of. This is not a great comparison. It's the one that came to mind. I'm kind of reminded of like how Space Dandy would switch wildly from episode to episode, except Space Dandy adequately prepared me to be switching wildly from episode to episode.
I mean, that was also a key part of the Space Dandy gimmick. It was willfully non-continuous.
What I'm saying is the first episode of Listeners prepared me for a mostly normal like adventure type thing. Then the second episode is this weird, you know, like journey through the mind torture thing, and that like throws all my expectations out the window, not in a good way. And then episode 3 like kind of goes back to like what would probably have been episode 2 of the adventure thing.
Yes.
And then episode 4 is just more just dumb crazy shit. And it's like I don't even know anymore what to think about this.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think the biggest issue with listeners is like, I mean, even before we knew it was only going to get, you know, even before we knew it was going to be a one-course show, which means that inevitably there is no way this thing is going to realistically measure up to Eureka 7. Like, the show, it like, you could clearly tell Daisato was just like, man, I really love music, and I'm just going to, like, fucking go all in on that shit in this show. Like, even ignoring that affectation, it's really difficult to stay attached to the plot or the characters when it all feels so ephemeral, honestly. Like, it doesn't feel connected.
There's not really an attempt to ground us in the characters and the world before it starts tossing off huge like concepts and crazy stuff like the episode 2 dream sequence, you know. There's not really much in a dream sequence that reveals our protagonist's darkest fears or whatever, since we barely know them to begin with.
Right, like that's like an episode you throw in like episode 7 or 8 or something. That's like supposed to be a mid-season climax where the dark illusions illustrate, oh, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, when we barely know these guys, it's just like, it muddles the already confusing world building even more.
Yeah, I think I'm with G on that, you know. I think I will say that I think this show successfully captures one of the things which Eureka 7 did have in abundance, which is that sense of wanderlust, for want of a better term. It has charm, it has kind of like a spirit that makes me want to like it a lot. But there's so much they're trying to do in so little time that
Right.
the story is just nigh on incomprehensible. Any sort of stabs for deeper meaning are just, ludicrously off target. They're trying so hard, God bless them, but it's such a mess. It's just difficult to get attached to because it veers so wildly across the spectrum that you just can't get settled and get comfortable and want to see what happens.
And it's kind of it is a little bit of a shame because I do think that, like, honestly, there are individual elements of listeners that I think wielded together a little bit differently could have resulted in something like, again, maybe not as, like, uniquely special as Eureka 7, but at least, like, compelling or weirdly entertaining, right? Because, like, you watch the 4th episode and, like, look, any episode where the kids are going to Freak Seed Academy, once attended by one Pete Badfinger, to find the secret drug Teen Spirit being distributed amongst the student body. Like,
because it's a drug used by soldiers in the endless war against the earless to increase their
These
ability.
are some amazing musical references, by
it's
the
like,
way.
I mean, for God's sake, there's a scene in this montage where they're meeting with various clubs in the school, and one of them is just the, like, Smashing Pumpkins Club or something. It is that kind of show, and those sensibilities could be really funny if done well.
I think the drug / soldier thing is a really good example of what the show is trying for and where it goes wrong. So they try and establish that this drug, Teen Spirit, is dangerous because it gives you delusions of grandeur, and they mention that it's like a favoured tipple of the soldiers on the front line who are also players, which means they command giant mechs. The show has never mentioned that there's an ongoing war at this point. It's never mentioned that players are soldiers while somehow also being, like, public attractions. It's not mentioned anything about a war or anything to do with that. And that stuff is just all casually dropped into a conversation as if it's something we should be au fait
Also, the
with.
person giving this exposition is, like, a fat high schooler wearing headphones, and he's commanding a small fairy that's wearing a necktie.
The fairy! Oh my god, I forgot about the fairy! There's no explanation!
This fairy's just floating around grabbing shit in the library, and I'm like, this is too much to process right now.
Like, there's no implication that it's a hologram or a highly advanced
people are
drone.
looking at it.
It's literally just like a Tinkerbell looking ass fairy with, like, sprinkles coming out and just, like, flying around. It's
For some reason, when you guys said fairy, the first thing I thought of, he was, like, floating in a boat in the library or something. But
I mean,
that's way weirder.
The other thing I would...
Sorry.
No, the only other thing I would say is that I think that the musical references are hilariously unsubtle. They're not particularly cute, and they actually actively distract from the storytelling, which I think is a problem.
Yeah. Right, they're not serving the purpose of the story or the setting or anything. It's just, I wanted to name this after a Nirvana song.
Yes, exactly.
Or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Better or worse than JoJo in this regard?
I mean, at least in JoJo, there's a fundamental hilarity between with the disconnect between the names and what they actually represent for the most part.
Yeah, JoJo's so ridiculous that they
and also yes,
man, the rock paper scissors attack.
Yeah, and like JoJo is, if you'll excuse me, JoJo's a comedy, basically. Like it is a world in which over the topness is not only expected, it's mandatory.
You're right. Yeah.
I mean, that's a story that's had like 3 decades to get us used to its sensibilities and aesthetics. So. Yeah.
All right. Well, I gotta say, guys, probably not gonna watch more of that unless you.
That's probably fine.
Unless you tell me different, something reverses later on. But yeah, I was. It's always more frustrating when you see the potential there, because like I could see there's a lot of cool things going on. I like the whole like early 2000s rock and roll anime aesthetic thing going on.
Joe, have you considered watching Eureka 7?
I had a feeling that's where this conversation was going to go. Once we run out of anime to watch here, who knows what will happen.
I'll
Anything
literally
goes.
mail you my Blu-rays. You can keep them.
Is it? That's right, Iro. You were not as high on it, right, as everybody else. But I don't know. That show never struck me as something I would personally enjoy. But it is
Eureka
definitely.
7
I know it's
is a time and place, for better or worse.
If you could somehow take 10 episodes from Eureka 7 and give them to listeners, I think you might improve both shows overall.
All right.
No
Someday.
changes. Let's just rip 10 episodes out of your 7, throw them into listeners.
Ouch.
They're still fun. They're still in 4-3 and everything.
All right. Let's move along to Sing Yesterday for me. Which so I feel like after episode 4 we have a pretty good framework for what's going on with the show, with the main characters. I would like to hear your guys' opinion on this. Would it be safe to say the show is going for more like an ensemble angle than just like the main boring dude?
I think it's gradually building out to that.
Because episode 3 it's still kind of focused on the main guy a little bit, but it's also a little more on Haru's life, and more reason for me to hate the boring guy after he stands her up. But there's one part, I forget it was in 3 or 4, where the little brother guy, I can't remember his name either.
Safety
he's
pin
like,
guy.
Safety pin guy, yeah, let's call him that. He's like talking to Haru and he's like, "What do you see in that guy?" And she's like, "I don't know." And I'm like, that's the main problem with the show.
Yes. I'm running to an issue. Like, I think it's broadly a good show so far, but I'm running to a very big issue of I don't understand why I'm supposed to care about any of these characters. Like,
yeah.
I
have to say,
them not knowing what they want, and like that listlessness is part of like the point, but also like I just don't know why I need to be invested in them.
Yeah. So I will say I was probably more interested in Shinako's story in episode 4.
Right.
Because she's still kind of boring, but she's a more likable character than the main guy, at least.
Sure.
And episode 4 is pretty much entirely focused on her and the safety pin guy.
Yes.
Someday we'll remember his name.
Bits where because he's in like an art school or something, and there's a lot of like, why are you even in art school, man? He's like, this is what I was told I was good at, and I don't know what else I'm supposed to do now.
Yeah. Well, isn't the thing like isn't he trying to emulate his brother? Isn't that what they're getting at?
Maybe. I was a little unclear on if he was doing that to imitate his brother or because it was the one thing he could do that his brother couldn't do.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's the latter. I think that like.
Okay, maybe it was the other way around. It's something driving him with his brother.
I think,
one way or the other.
My problem is kind of similar to Iroh's in that I think the show is good overall. I think it's likeable. I enjoy seeing these characters. I don't really know what the end game is here, and I get that that's kind of not the point, but I mean, everything I've heard, and like Aqua has spoken to me about the manga and stuff, the indication is that the whole point is to spend time with these characters, that the story doesn't necessarily have a driving conclusion because life doesn't have a driving conclusion, but that doesn't make for a very good story, I don't think. And I don't really know what is going to drive these characters forward and what's going to drive my interest in the story forward. And without that, I find spending time with them pleasant, but I don't really feel compelled to dig deeper into them.
So,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, this manga ran for
A long time.
a fairly long time, right? So, do you
It
guys?
was like 18, 19 years or something like that.
Goddamn. So, right, I think I did mention that a few podcasts ago. But so then is the vibe you guys get from this is like I haven't watched any of this, but does it feel like it's a slow burn that is eventually going to ramp up, or do you think like this is what this show is? This is what this story is.
It feels closer to the latter to me.
Yeah, I think we are getting sold on this as a romance show, and and the structure of the plot is like the most basic romance show plot lines ever invented, to the point where it actually annoys me. But they're filling it in with more of like the introspective 20-something coming of age feelings stuff, more so than the should I date this girl or the other girl.
Is this one of those
stuff.
things where maybe the story works better as a manga? Like, the pacing works differently when you're reading it as opposed to watching it?
I think that the animated medium brings a great deal to the story, actually. I think
It's a very nice looking show.
Okay,
I wouldn't want to give up the animated part.
I think as well it's well acted and has good music, and all of those things contribute to the atmosphere, which I think is the strongest part of the show in general.
Yeah. I'll throw out because I generally agree with what you guys are saying. I might be maybe a little higher on the show, but I do have my own concerns with it. I'll throw out a little bit of a defense, and what I've been saying this whole time is I do think like the writing has a certain I'm not even necessarily going to say realism to it, because the characters are kind of very
It's a little more nuanced than like your usual like manga anime dialogue.
Yeah, there's a certain realism and experience to what is being said in the show, though, and I think what the big example I noticed in these two episodes is how both the boring main guy and Shinako are both in a position where, and this is just kind of one example of what I'm talking about. They're both in a position where they have this person that likes them. They don't really like them back, or, whatever. They're so tied up in their own stuff that they don't really have any intention of doing anything with it. But they still kind of indulge them a little bit anyway, because that feels good. Mm-hmm. That's not a great thing to do, but it's something that, that I'll say I've done it, or I've been on both ends of it. I mean, that's a thing that people do
right.
in real life, that like you can tell the author has like some kind of life experience that they're tapping into. It's not like they're necessarily
stringing them on with malice, just...
Right, because they don't want to do it, but it's hard not to, because, it feels good when you have somebody validating you like that. Yeah, you like the attention, right? And that's human, but that's an insight into how humans work, and that's kind of like, that's where I'm seeing the strengths of the show,
right?
Is in that kind of sort of insight and experience, and they're kind of exploring that kind of stuff more so than the, is he going to hook up with this girl? Is he going to hook up with this girl?
Right.
So, it's not that I wouldn't like to see also some kind of development, and not just have this kind of like float around for 12 episodes or however long it's going to be. But I do think that's where the strength of the show is in how it's exploring those very real human feelings that are not always black and white, good, bad stuff. And, I'm cool with that aspect of it, and I think that's where the strength is. I don't know if it's enough to really put it like over the top as one of the best shows I'm watching. But
how long until the two teens start dating, and then the dynamic gets switched 180 degrees?
I don't know if they're going to go that far. They're definitely going to tease it. They're definitely going to. Sure. I think they're definitely going to explore that direction, but I don't know if they're actually going to go as far as to have the two of them dating, unless they decide to like make a pact to
sure.
Make the other two jealous, which would probably drive me crazy, because that'd be really dumb. But yeah, so I mean, it is so well produced.
Uh-huh.
Like you almost just enjoy just watching it because it looks so nice. But yeah, I don't know. I do think it could be better because, like I said, I do get aggravated with how basic the plot is sometimes. So there's some good and some bad in there, but I like it.
Speaking of shows about listless millennials.
Hey.
Yes. So let's end and talk about Wave Listen to Me, which I think I mentioned this last time, covers similar topics but in a very different tone.
Oh, a little different. A little. Maybe a little bit more high energy.
This show's great.
Yeah, I did not think Wave was going to be the one for me this season, but it's really grown on me with every episode.
Yeah, so in the last 2 episodes, we kind of had a bit of the transition of Minari losing her job and then temporarily staying with the one girl that works at the radio station while she's looking for work and trying to figure out. She gets offered the 3:30 a.m. slot.
Yeah, like night radio.
On the radio. Again, I still think the weakest part of the show is when they get into the minutia of the radio stuff. Like, I really don't care about sponsors and all that garbage they were getting into. But, yeah, it's just, I just love the show's sense of humor.
The, 1-2 joke punch of she enters her apartment and flops over or whatever, and you think back to episode 1 where she said, no matter how wasted I am, I'm always able to put my shoes away and make to my bed. And you're like, oh man, she must be really right now must be really rough for her. And then the second reveal that no, she was never that well put together.
She was always going to that one guy's house.
Right. It is a great reveal of, yes, it works so well because for us, the viewer, as well as Minari herself, right, of we're learning with her how much of a mess she is.
Yeah. I think my favorite joke was when she was talking to the turtles, but
that was also very good, yes.
You eat where you shit, huh? Just like politics. It's weird, right? Because the show is honestly kind of based on the way you guys described yesterday. Wave is kind of similar in some broad ways, but it approaches it in such a different a lot more
energy.
Caustic.
I mean, yes, it's a lot more caustic, right? The personalities are a lot more caustic, almost veering on toxic, right? I mean,
right.
Minari's quote unquote closest friend is nice, Nakahara, aka radiating mad Mr. Nice Guy energy,
Oof.
Right.
Just well, I'll always be there for you, Minari, and it's just oh my god, my guy, just
cool it, cool your jets, sir.
Ease up, maybe 30-40%, okay,
Yeah, it's oh look, it's just like we're married. I'm yeah, you gotta chill with that, bro.
Damn, dude,
it's not gonna get you anywhere.
Right, and then even I'm not sure if this is the direction they're gonna take it in, but even once she starts rooming with the unrealistically nice radio girl, there are a couple places where she gives Minari this look of
wow, you're a fuck up.
Yeah. She's but because she's so nice, because she's so generous and accommodating, she's you'll always have a place to stay here, Minari. By the way, where are you gonna go get a job, you fucking bum? It's it's
silently judging her.
It's and I think that they do a really good job of helping you empathize with somebody who by all intents and purposes you get why people you simultaneously understand both why she is the way she is and why we can sympathize with that, but also why maybe some people, you can tell some of these people have been putting up with this for a while now, and
right,
they don't have much patience for it anymore.
I do continue to find the Sing Yesterday for Me comparisons interesting, because I feel like that show is kind of taking a very romanticized look at that period of your life, whereas Wave Listen to Me is much more of a down to earth, like, okay, this is how it really is type of as ridiculous as some of the things that are actually happening, the inner monologue and thoughts that Minari has and everything are very, like, more down to earth. And I don't know if maybe that's a little bit because in Yesterday they're supposed to be, like, in their very early 20s, and she's supposed to be more like mid to late 20s, which you wouldn't think is a huge difference, but it is a difference.
Some shit changes.
Yeah, it is a difference. You've had a little time.
There's definitely a big gap there.
Yeah. So
I hate that I already look back on my early 20s.
No, let's not on tape.
Not on tape. But yeah, again, I love the show's sense of humor and how they're balancing it out with the what could be serious questions that she's dealing with, but they never take it, too seriously. They keep it from, they always make it just crazy enough to keep it from getting boring, right? Like there's always some kind of, let's have her boss get hit by a car, and
both the boss and
force
the replacement employee for
and
her.
the replacement, so that we can conveniently keep the plot moving.
Yes.
But
What
do you guys think is up with the mysterious quiet girl that shows up?
I got nothing, man.
You mean
because something's up with her at the end,
right?
In episode 4.
Yeah, the sister of the
the so-called. I don't believe that, but
so
the so-called sister.
I look at her and I'm like, dog, let me tell you, this is the most Hiroaki Samura-ass female character design. Like, this is the most Blade of the Immortal-ass looking girl.
She's just not wearing
in
a kimono.
Show. Right, like
it's the only difference.
Like the gloomy, almost dead-eyed, stereotypically like Japanese-looking woman, like who is either like.
Right.
If this is Hiroaki, if this were Blade of the Immortal, she'd either be a prostitute, an assassin, or both. So, very curious what's going on here, but I guess that's the thing, right?
I'm wondering if, and I think this would be actually a pretty good joke. What if the station manager sent her to break up her
to like
her safety
try
net
and
at the restaurant,
remove all of Minare's like other options,
to force her into radio? Oh man, that would be some real good Galaxy Brain shit.
Because I feel like this is the type of show where that would happen.
Right. I could believe that.
So that's my guess, but I don't know.
I honestly couldn't give you a good guess. I feel like this show is like just unpredictable enough that I can't make any like particularly confident guesses in where things are going. The only thing I can really feel sure of is like, I assume eventually Minare is going to go on radio, and
yeah, that seems like that's from the preview next week. I think she's finally going to get on.
And I'm curious.
But I mean, we've seen the flash. We've seen the flash forward. We know she gets on eventually.
And I am curious how they handle that, because like, I mean, I'm not as against the radio minutiae as you are, Jel, but I am curious. I think the show has done such a good job of staying entertaining in almost every like aspect and scenario. I am confident and or hopeful that even once they get to like the radio stuff and the nitty gritty of that they will still find ways to keep that spontaneous and interesting.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not really complaining too much about the radio because they do keep it pretty minimal. It's just when it does come up, I'm like, yeah, we can skip past this. But we'll see once she actually gets in the booth. They already did their bit where they're going over, push this button and hold that and wait for 3 seconds and all that other. So I hope they don't have to go over that again. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing where that goes. And if that does turn out to be the joke with that girl, remember you heard it here first.
So we got either, I mean, at this point it's like either that or serial killers, so
yeah, a little bit of both. All right, so I think that's gonna do it then. That's the end of our list.
Yeah,
pretty solid.
We don't have time to get into Kamen Rider 01, unfortunately. Maybe next time.
Well, we'll have we've already cut 3 shows for next time,
Yeah,
there'll be more time.
I do just want to say that the new Super Sentai started, and it seems pretty good. Also, the lead actor caught COVID-19 and has been out for a little while, so...
Right, I think we did...
Yeah, we mentioned that briefly last time.
I'll just say that the show is good, and therefore I hope he is safe and well, and that he comes back soon.
So.
Excellent.
I mean, look, even if the show was bad...
I know, obviously.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, the Ninja Red Ranger, fuck that guy.
Oof.
Alright,
yes,
that's a perfect
and,
way to end this song.
let's end this before we start wishing.
No, all jokes, of course. All japes. Do not actually wish anyone to get sick of
Also, Kamen Rider 01 has basically just turned into corporate warfare, and it's pretty good.
I don't know, guys. I don't know about that one.
Corporate warfare over whether AI get to count as human or not. Anyway, next time.
We'll have some more time next time
so.
for sure. So
Yeah, and maybe by next time, there might be new episodes of BNA out by then.
Maybe.
Yeah, is there an official schedule for that, or
I think
just
actually it's
they
probably
decide?
realistically the next podcast after next. I think even by next time, I think they'll have just hit episode 5 or 6. So.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, housekeeping then. You check us out at theglorioblog.com, including Zig's coverage of Digimon Adventure up to episode 3 for now. Whenever that resumes, and you can go back and look at all our other old first looks on other shows too. And
the final episode of Legend of GLORIO Heroes.
Yes, that is out now.
Yes, the final episode of Legend of the GLORIO Heroes went out. Our perspective a couple months later. So me and Marlon are actually on that one as well, and just give our final thoughts on the series. That was interesting. That was fun to do, but. Yeah, so you can check that out and all the other podcast episodes on the feed, on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podbean. We're also on YouTube. Please subscribe. We're getting so close to our 100 subscribers, chipping away.
Get it done.
Tell your friends, tell your enemies, and we'll catch everybody next time.
Take it easy.